Oh, and yet I will also diverge with you on one thing. Government did a lot of damage in the last 50 years, but there's a difference between government and state. And the Indian state has also substantial achievements in the last 50 years. Hmm. And it was the existence of a strong public domain, a strong public sector, that differentiated you from the banana republics of Central America and South America, because you had a strong public sector. Okay. I go to IITs and kids and IIMs and kids are asking me about, isn't it bad subsidies? I'm being asked this question by the most subsidized brats on the planet. Hmm. Per capita, the bloody highest subsidies come to you guys, and you're talking about stopping subsidies for some poor, woman in Jharkhand working on the NREGS. Just go and find out. Do a study on what your subsidy per capita is, what the cost of actually educating one of you for 5 years is, and what you actually pay as fees. Do the damn calculation. As I said, we don't like doing those numbers. We don't like. So you have successive governments subverting the constitution of India, the Indian state and its edifice, by running it precisely in contravention, in contradiction to the principles and the. For me, I'm not a legal person, though as a journalist I've had to deal with enormous amounts of legal stuff. But for me, as a lay person, I don't know, fundamental rights may be the heart of the Constitution. For me, the directive principles are the soul of the Constitution. I'm not even saying that you should implement all of them. There are 5, 6 of them which have, a real meaning. If you get past those, if you achieve those, then your entire program comes from a different basis. You move forward on a very different basis. Yeah, you had a question.
So while answering the first question, you spoke about how India should be following alternative forms of development. Now, can you tell me?
I said alternative forms of measurement of that. Yeah.
No, no.
Also on the development issue, I think that
When
whole.
you were talking about basically how we are mining until
Yeah,
we get
yeah.
to nowhere. So basically, that's when you said we should be following alternate forms of development. Now, could you tell me what these are? The only thing I can think of right now is the capabilities of such. But then, considering the logistics of actually implementing that approach, where we have, I don't know what our population is right now, 1 billion, 2 billion,
1.28.
yeah. So where do we start? And then another thing is, can you give me an example of a country that actually has a good development program and that's worked? One country,
Oh,
so that I can see the
more than one. You can see the difference between many countries. We'll come to that. But firstly, there is, thank you, because you bring it back to that debate. Firstly, there is an idea that development means industrialization. I've spent 35 years in the field finding out that's wrong. Hmm? And there is by the way, I was never trained as a journalist, I was trained as a historian. Hmm? And I quit academia to become a journalist. I'm still very grateful to the fact that my degree is in history. And it actually was socio-economic history. It wasn't about the existence of Pushpak Vimanam in the times of Ram. Right. So there's an alternative path of development for you. Right? We had Pushpak Vimanam. Let's go back and rediscover them. Let's dig deep in the snows of the Himalayas. They must be there somewhere because we don't have any archaeological evidence. In the Human Development Index, then, as I said, data gives you trends and directions. Right? Do you know that every single Latin American country, including Bolivia, which is counted as the poorest of Latin American countries, and of Caribbean countries, every country except Haiti, which has had a very bad time for 40 years, hmm, every single country in Latin America and Caribbean, including Bolivia, barring Haiti, scores a higher rank on the Human Development Index than you do. For 20 years, Rwanda, which had a civil war and a genocide, had a better ranking on the Global Hunger Index than you do. Every one of these countries has done better. And a country that, for if you're looking at the basic services, yeah, do you know who ranks at number 58 and 58 in the okay. Oh, by the way, Sri Lanka ranks 20 points ahead of you. Do you know that Sri Lanka has had no private sector in the education sector? No private ownership in the education sector. In high schools, in the 1990s, they introduced some degree of, yeah. In the 60s, 70s, 80s, there was no private schooling. Okay, they followed something which is there in our principles, which we didn't follow. Okay, Sri Lanka is ahead of you because of following those basic principles of meeting the most important and essential human needs. Sri Lanka is Sri Lanka has fought a civil war for 40 years and does better than you on every count in the Human Development Index. Think about your answer is right there. Second, Vietnam fought the world's bloodiest, most brutal and cruel war after World War II. Yeah? Vietnam is 30, 40, maybe 50 positions ahead of you in the Human Development Index. Yeah? They followed the Vietnamese brand of socialism, but which has a role for the private sector. Hmm? But universal education, universal health, universal shelter, these were the principles. I've already named two countries for you. Do you know a country that ranks at about 60? I haven't seen the latest one. Ranked for 20 years that the Human Development Index has ranked higher than several marginal countries belonging to politically the category called West, is Cuba. Yeah, it has the best health system in the world. It has the best health system in the world.
Okay.
And hold on, I'm answering your question. Hmm. And Cuba, when I said I said you can adjust the ranking by removing the per capita income. If you remove the per capita income, Cuba shoots above Saudi Arabia, whose ranking is mainly based on per capita income. So I'm trying to tell you, firstly, there are 1,000 examples to show you answer your question. You can look at the Global Hunger Index, you can look at the Human Development Index, you can look at the World Health Report, you can look at any of these, you'll find it. And yeah, somebody else had. Yeah, sure. Someone from this side. Yeah.
So I'll just shift focus slightly to the issues that are going on presently. To what extent do you think it is acceptable for journalists, especially TV news anchors on both sides, to allow their personal opinions to permeate their professional space, and especially at a time where the majority of our public opinion is shaped by these media houses? To what extent do we think we can allow substitution of news with opinion?
You know what they're substituting it with is not even opinion. It's rants. Okay. Um, I don't ever do TV panels except at election time. I get about 14, 15 calls a week. You know? I think that if I did a panel, I would probably end up in jail. You see, someone sitting next to me saying, they were flying chariots in, you know. Now the only mature civilized answer to that is to get up and beat his head repeatedly on the table. Right? Since the legal consequences of that are fraught with danger, I decline. Okay. You have, again, by the way, the media that you are criticizing, who are they? Completely corporatized media. Extreme concentration of ownership on a scale never known in your history, and in existing US and Australia have greater levels of media concentration than you do. Hmm? But the nature of your media concentration is just incredible, gross, awful. Now, all of you see ETV Bengali? You've seen that? There's ETV Marathi, ETV Odia. E stands for ENAD. ETV Marathi, ETV Urdu, ETV Tamil, ETV Malayalam. Except for the Telugu channels, all the ETV channels are owned by one Mukesh Ambani. Did you know that? Are you aware of that? Get aware. It's called media literacy. Get to know who your media are. Don't treat them as some independent, autonomous entity out there. It's like in economics, you talk about the invisible hand of the market. The invisible hand of the market is a very identifiable bunch of grubby paws. I can tell you whose hand that is. When one particular thing goes up and the other goes down, it's very easy to spot the hand, and you'll usually find the hand in the tail. That invisible hand is there, invisible because it's in the tail. Yeah. So your all the eNadu channels, except the Telugu channels, were sold to an entity called IMT and Network 18. Who owns Network 18? Ambani. Network 18 is a gigantic empire, far more. Mr. Ambani will not be able to name a third of the channels that he has. Okay? But his ownership is so vast. Now, here's something that you need to know. The nature of monopoly in media has changed dramatically in the last 20-25 years. 20-25 years ago, there used to be somebody having a monopoly on network news. There used to be a monopoly on 5-6 people controlling much of newspaper circulation. Today's media monopolies are not monopolies in themselves. They are very small departments in much larger conglomerates with interests way beyond their immediate subject. So, Network 18 is the largest network, but it's a very small part of Reliance's empire. Get it? So, who's now he who pays the piper calls the tune? Whose tune is Network 18? And Network 18 has given orders to all their anchors, reporters. You shall not cover Aam Aadmi Party unless there is something dirty you can say about Kejriwal. Now, I have no particular sympathy for the Aam Aadmi Party, but I think that's disgraceful journalism. In fact, it's not journalism. You're looking in the last 20-25 years, the issue that has developed for you is this. You're looking at the consolidation of a corporate state in your country. You're looking at unbelievable levels of corporate intervention and control in everything. And corporate law firms are on the rise as well. Okay, in everything, in every sector, corporates are controlling. Your sports is being dismembered. Here in this country, we privatized a national passion called cricket. Yeah, and put it Kolkata Knight Riders without a single player from Kolkata. I mean, it is actually pretty repulsive to me. If you're a cricket fanatic as I am and have been, I used to attend all 5 days of tests when I was 4. Now, if you love the game, you love the sport, what you've seen is the conversion, the last 25 years, the hyper commercialization of everything. Who are we as human beings? Do we have something in us beyond profit and loss? Do we have something in us beyond the accumulation of money? Is there a value to it? So I entirely agree with you, and I've been being a professional journalist of 35 years. What you find objectionable, I find obnoxious and revolting. Yeah? But it is also a very clear strategy that is followed by channels, by newspapers, which reflect the interests of their corporate ownership. So that's going to get worse, not better. Yeah. Yeah.
Sir, what do you think would be the good way to change the language of charity and SOPs? And even if you include a lot of factors within the HDI, is there any way to ever mainstream issues which have been treated as fringe issues and not include them as additional factors?
You see, the thing of something becoming mainstream or not becoming mainstream has to do with the great processes of your time. Yeah. It's in, like for 30 years now, the great issue has been fiscal deficit. In the 50s and 60s, governments used to boast about how much their deficit was. How many of you know this? Including the government of the United States. They used to boast about how big their deficit was as a symbol of how much they were carrying and spending on poor people. It's that universe has changed. And with it, Our moral universe has changed. You know, anything that happens anywhere has to be justified in terms of commercial interest. Hmm. I'm saying one, we are in a planet with swiftly depleting resources. Even if we are going by commercial measurements, we are not counting the costs of digging up all the mines, of tearing up all the forests. We are not counting the costs. What I'm trying to say is your problem is genuine, your issue is genuine. I agree with you. But why does it happen? It happens. I was in IIM Bangalore the other day. I run a thing called the People's Archive of Rural India ever since I quit the Hindu. Uh, just a little number for you, my friend. Uh, the Center for Media Studies Delhi comes out every year with figures on what the media cover. Hmm. Rural India, 0.18%. On front page and prime time, 0.18%. Agriculture, 0.16%. And that's in a year when agriculture has been in focus because of a drought. Yeah. Now you ask, you know, how much time was dedicated to, say, Katrina Kaif as against agriculture and rural India. And even what we call coverage of agriculture is really about the Prime Minister visiting a rural area. Right? They are not going to do anything which does not add to revenue. So there are in the newspapers and in the channels and elsewhere, there is not a single full-time reporter covering at the national level the poverty beat. I was it until I stepped down from Hindu. There was no other rural editor, you know, and there isn't now. There isn't a rural editor in an Indian newspaper or a channel level. Everything has to be justified on the basis of revenue. Now, here's a problem. I said IIM Bangalore. I run the People's Archive of Rural India. I run it for guys like you. It's a free access site. They were all very impressed with what I showed them, and they asked me, "But so what about the revenue model?" You know what? Name for me one great work of art or literature which would be in existence today if the creator had to produce a revenue model approved by a panel of five. What if Valmiki had been asked to submit a revenue model before he wrote the Ramayana? Would there have been a Shakespeare if he had to have a revenue model before he created whatever he created? You know who had a sound revenue model? Veerappan. And for 30, 40 years it worked very well. There were some risks. But what is entrepreneurialism without risk? Right? Right. There are risks, right? If you're an entrepreneur. Isn't that the great romance of entrepreneurialism? Taking risks. Yeah. So that how you have to change that, reverse that debate. If I'm here today, it's because I have that hope that your generation can reverse that debate and take that fight is on now in the streets of Kolkata and Delhi and many and 100 other campuses, including the FTI, whether you can take back the debate to rationality and sanity. Notice that in the last 2 years, who is being dying? Who is being murdered? Huh? It's not just secular people that are hated. Within secularists, it is rationalists who are hated. Narendra Dabholkar, Govind Pansare, M.M. Kalburgi, all were rationalists. I'm a rationalist, but I'm not a rationalist activist. It's not something I'm actively campaigning on. Yeah? The people hated most are the rationalists. Think about it. Those are the ones getting themselves assassinated because they can because they have the potential of changing the debate, of showing you what frauds these god men and god women are. They have that potential. That's why they get murdered. That's why they're getting murdered. I think that some fantastic things are happening right now. Terrible things, obnoxious things. But I think the response of the students' generation right now is beginning to coalesce, beginning to crystallize, beginning to respond to what is happening. And that is a damn good thing. What we need to do is to shift the moral universe we've invented for for ourselves in the last 20 years. I'm sorry, friend. Yeah, you've been waiting patiently.
Sir, you talked extensively about inequality increasing in the country. Now, what happens when that inequality is percolating in the representative institutions in the country? Say, when a Haryana state legislature passes a law which makes it compulsory to have education till class 12th
And which
and
is
also
upheld by the
toilets,
Supreme Court.
and approved by the Supreme Court, exactly, sir. So that's not just our representative institutions, but also the entire state machinery. Now, what recourse does the ordinary person have?
Thank you very much for asking me that question. I'd forgotten that issue, and I mean, I had meant to bring it up, and I completely slipped because there's the problem with fighting over growth. Hmm? Uh, Actually, all of you as law students, I'm sure, have followed. Not only Haryana, Rajasthan has then followed up,
Yes, exactly. Rajasthan
and
also.
the Rajasthan High Court has dismissed an appeal against it in light of the fact that the Supreme Court has dealt with the issue. Okay, please understand what those laws do. In Rajasthan, 90% of Dalit women cannot contest local body elections. Nine, inclusive growth, right? So inclusive that you exclude 90% of Dalit women from any panchayat institutions. They cannot contest. If you, incidentally, if you take rural Rajasthan, those laws exclude 62% of males because the level of education, and I found it appalling that the Supreme Court of this country will is willing to punish women for not being educated, but not punish the state for not having given them access to education. It did not punish the state. It did not say a word, rapping the state on the knuckles or the government on the knuckles for not having. Your constitution said free access to free and compulsory education to the second, to 10 years, to 10th, within 10 years of the adoption of the constitution, free and compulsory education, within 10 years. It is now how many years? Okay. 60, 65 years since the adoption of your constitution. So first you completely penalize poor women who have socially, economically, culturally been denied entry and access to schools, colleges, and education. And then they have a graded thing. For Dalit women, fifth standard. For others, eighth standard. If you want, then that is ward member. Then sarpanch is another educational qualification. Then block president is another higher level. By the way, if we adopt all those levels, Smriti Irani cannot be education minister of this country. Yeah. A dropout, unlike Rohit Vemula, who came and was a PhD scholar, who died when his family was in facing destitution because his fellowship was withheld for 7 months to punish the boy. 7 months. You know what he was doing on his fellowship? He was living on 2,000, 3,000 rupees a month and sending the rest of the fellowship home to his mother for his family to live on. That's what he was doing. I said there were 400 million who never entered a school or a college. He comes out of that background, the only person in his family. He comes out of a village in Guntur that I know, out of an area in Guntur, infamous for bonded labor. He comes out of that background and comes to PhD without taking a quota place. That is his achievement. That was his achievement. Now the Rohit, the women Vemulas of the countryside are going to be shut out of the panchayats, out of the representative bodies. The whole word representative bodies becomes a contradiction in terms because they are not representative. And the first round of elections and by-elections held in Haryana under that have consolidated the hold of the richest families in the village and in the district over representative. But it is also true of our, we have achieved that in other ways commercialization achieves it in other ways as well. Who can contest an election? In the United States, you spent $100 million for the right to contest the election. You have to go through all these primaries and primaries and everything, and the whole chimera to be able to be a candidate. And in India, the current Lok Sabha, the present Lok Sabha of India, by the self-declaration on the affidavits, 82% of all your MPs are crorepatис. 82% are self-declared. That's a very high percentage considering we know how modest they are. One of the things that is worth fighting for, by the way, in legal reform, in reform of a law rather, is that the election affidavit must be accompanied by your income tax return. What the hell does it have any meaning if it's not accompanied by your tax return? I can state any figure over there. Mr. Chandrababu Naidu's figures get lower each time. Because he changes the market value of his house. Okay. He says that I'm not going to put the market value, I'm going to put the original value at which it was purchased. The difference is 30 crores or something. Okay? So, unless you have your tax return attached to your election affidavit, I do not take your declaration seriously. Now, how many crorepattis were there? You know that the election affidavit declaration was introduced in 2004. On that count, the number of crorepattis in Parliament in Lok Sabha was 32%. In 2009, it was 53%. In 2014, it is 82%. As I was telling your contemporaries in IIM Bangalore, you guys think you're good business managers? Can anyone get you returns on this scale? Which stock market, which share bazaar can give you the kind of returns that the lawmakers are seeing? These are lawmakers. These are lawmakers. Okay? So that representation even there has been choked off. 82% of people in the parliament, do they represent that 90% of rural Indians whose main breadwinner earns less than 10,000? So those are very serious questions of representation. I think what has happened in Haryana and Rajasthan, there is only one way now out of it. The way out of it is that somebody has got to file a case in the Supreme Court basing on an example of some state other than these two and seek a full bench, full constitutional bench on the subject, and then, if their lordships are so inclined, we might get a decent judgment. Just one second. Yeah, we have a 7 minutes more. Yes.
My question is with respect to telling the syllabus. So there's been a lot of debate as to what the syllabus for certain subjects. Like I've been a student of history and political science. So how do we change that? And if the government wants to change it in schools or at the central level at universities. So I mean, I personally feel like the two sides are too polarized to get into to even engage each other in a debate. So I mean, what are your thoughts on that? And do you think that there can actually be a debate or a discussion?
So I think that, by the way, too many of us cop out of the debate by saying there are two sides, both of them are bad. One of them is a lot worse than the other. I think that has to be recognized. Okay. Now in Rajasthan, in the English textbooks, they've thrown out all foreign authors. They've expunged Shelley, Keats, Byron. They've expunged all these, and they've expunged all these people from school textbooks in Rajasthan and replaced it with little local writers whom nobody outside the Shaka has heard of. The Little Brave Girl of Rajasthan, that's one of the English treasures that is now in the textbooks of Rajasthan. Now, when those kids, subjected to this crap, when they go for their board exams, when they're competing nationally, they're going to get shimmied. Okay? They're really going to get opened up. Right? So you got to be bold enough to say that this is crap. No? you're ensuring that the next generation of children in Rajasthan will go forward with minimal knowledge of the English language. Which now, if you don't want to have the English language in your schools and colleges, that's another debate. That's a different conversation, debatable, arguable. But you do. But when you know that you want to do it and you're going to do it, you say that we are only using local writers, Indian writers, to instill a sense of pride. Then you have lots of Indian writers whom you can use also, but you're not doing that. You're putting some completely unknown names, and you'll have one token Tagore there, one poem, the same poem, you know it, right? As if he wrote nothing else. You think Tagore wrote nothing else but one poem, Where the Mind is Without Fear. And it is being introduced in an educational system where their mind is filled with fear. Right? So that's how it is. You have to have the courage to say this is crap. And for that, you have to recognize that you live in a political world and there is something called politics. When I went to JNU as a student in 1977, just as the emergency was collapsing, I was met at the gate by a poster. It said, "Welcome. When politics decides if you will enter this university, when politics decides which university you will enter, when politics decides what you will learn in this university, when politics decides who will teach you, when politics decides if you get a job when you leave this place, when politics decides what sort of job you will get or not get, when politics decides all these things, decide what your politics will be." Now, one of the horrible things that the media has done is to make a merger between the word politics and political parties. Politics is the lifeblood, the oxygen of democratic societies. You know, oh, you have these anchors proudly saying, "We don't have any politics." Of course you do, you knucklehead. But I mean, really poorly educated, poorly, about 20, 30 years ago, I was sitting in a meeting of Bal Thackeray, from which, by the way, I was thrown out. And it was the first big NRI convention for the Sainath. And people were whistling and clapping, guys from Harvard Law School, Harvard Business School, people from Princeton, people from elsewhere were clapping and cheering as he said Muslims are responsible for 99% of the crimes of smuggling, rape, and murder in this country. You know, well, Thackeray spoke, well, he spoke Thackeray. Okay. And everybody was cheering. That day I went home. By the way, that was the same day a chap called Abdul Kalam launched Agni 2. Anyway, that day I went home and I went back to my paper, which was Blitz, and I wrote a piece saying, I've coined a new term. From that day, I stopped using the word highly educated. I replaced it with expensively educated. They're not highly educated. And guys, much as I've loved talking to you, I've got maybe 5 minutes and then I run for the car. 12:15. Yeah, come on. Anything else? Yeah.
Oh, can you just go ahead and yeah, I think you can just like, yeah, just go ahead with your question.
Which one of you? Okay, I'll take both questions and then I'll answer them. Yeah, quickly.
So this on student activism in India right now. So compared with say protests that happened in Yale or Columbia, or even the protests in South Africa, there is a sense that like, student activism, not just right now but in the past say 10, 15 years, have been the issues that have been spoken about have been hijacked by political parties. So you said in your speech at JNU as well that you were an activist yourself in your days. So
of the students' union.
Yeah, yes, sir. So my point is that
do you have a union here?
no, we do. That's my point. Sir.
Are you a member of the union?
No, sir. Everyone is member of the union.
Yeah.
No,
so was I. But I was active.
Yes, sir. So my question is, So my question is how I mean, so a lot of the issues that are spoken about on campus are very important, but these issues are also diluted by